Which Nokia smartphone is better? That's what we're here to find out. I'm Taylor Martin, this is Pocketnow, and this is the Lumia Icon versus the Lumia 1020. The Lumia 1020 is still one of the most progressive smartphones in recent memory. The 41 megapixel image sensor defined the phone and put Nokia's biggest competitors on their heads. To date, it's still capable of taking the most impressive pictures of any smartphone by far, with the exception of its distant Symbian cousin, the 808 PureView. The 1020 was groundbreaking nonetheless, and Nokia is continuing that momentum by bringing other impressive handsets to more carriers. Enter the Lumia Icon, which will launch on Verizon Wireless later this week. How does it compare with the 1020? Does the Lumia Icon share the 1020's impressive photo-taking capabilities? Or can we toss the Icon into the ever-growing pile of disappointing CDMA Windows phones? Let's take a few minutes to find out, shall we? On the outside, the Lumia Icon is pretty drastically different from pretty much all the other Lumia smartphones made in the last few years. On the other hand, the Lumia 1020 is practically identical to all the others, minus what my colleague Michael Fisher calls an Oreo on the backside. Most recent Lumia smartphones have all featured the same rounded edges, unibody polycarbonate build with a flat top and bottom edges. They've usually been bright and colorful and very distinctly Nokia design. The Lumia 900, 920, 1020, 1520, and most in between, minus the Lumia 925, have all very closely resembled. The Lumia Icon, however, is very squared and industrial, with a matte finished metal band wrapping around the edges and a matte polycarbonate backside. And there are two slightly lighter tone stripes on either side of the micro USB port on the bottom and 3.5mm port on the top edge. And unlike more recent models like the 1020 and 1520, the camera on the backside of the Icon is entirely flush. We imagine all these discrepancies are thanks to Verizon, but for once we're not complaining, though we could do without the unsightly logo on the top left corner of the face and the tramp stamp on the back. Sizing the Icon up with the 1020, despite the larger display on the Icon, the two are very similar in size. At 137mm tall, the Icon is 6.6mm taller than the 1020, but at 0.4mm narrower and 0.6mm thinner. And the Icon and 1020 hit the scales at 167 and 158 grams respectively. The biggest set of differences between these two flagships from Nokia, however, are the beefy specs lists. Being that the 1020 launched in late July 2013, its specifications have slowly started to age, just slightly. Inside it has 2GB of RAM, 32GB of storage, a 2000 mAh battery, and a Snapdragon S4 SoC, composed of a 1.5 GHz dual-core Crate CPU and Adreno 225 GPU. The camera, of course, is rated at 41 megapixels, and the display measures 4.5 diagonal inches and bears a resolution of 1280 by 768 pixels. The Lumia Icon also has 2GB of RAM and 32GB of fixed storage, but its battery is 2420 mAh, and it comes with a much more powerful Snapdragon 800 chipset, composed of a 2.2 GHz quad-core Crate 400 CPU and Adreno 330 GPU. The image sensor is rated at 20 megapixels, and the display is 5 inches diagonally with 1080p resolution. Both have NFC, Wi-Fi AC, and Bluetooth 4.0. The Icon also has Qi wireless charging built in, whereas the 1020 does not. There are two major differences with the displays. Both have great blacks, of course, and the colors are super saturated. But the higher density of the Icon's 1080p panel is visible to the naked eye. Edges of the home screen tiles are noticeably smoother than those on the 1020. And viewing angles. The Icon seems to have slightly better side visibility. A more minor note, the 1020's display appears to be slightly warmer than the Icon's. Other than that, the display differences are negligible. In terms of design and hardware alone, the 1020 is definitely more distinct, while the Icon is more understated. Not everyone will like the stark industrial design of the Icon, but we're smitten with it. We still haven't gotten over the awkward way the 1020 lays on a table. Both the Lumia 1020 and Icon are running the same version of Windows Phone software, Update 3, with the Nokia Lumia Black update. Almost everything is exactly the same, feature for feature, except for two. First, the glance feature. The Lumia Icon does not support glance, due to some hardware restrictions, and that's seriously unfortunate, as it's one of our favorite Nokia Windows Phone features to date. The other is density. More tiles will fit on the Lumia Icon's home screen than the 1020. Aside from that, the usual stuff comes pre-packaged. The Nokia camera app, Cinemagraph, mixed radio, screen beamer, storyteller, and much more. The important question is, how noticeable are the spec improvements on the Icon over the 1020? As far as opening, closing, and switching apps, everyday performance is going to be virtually identical. The faster clock speed of the Icon's CPU does cut the initial launch time of applications. Each application opens a split second faster on the Icon. but switching between previously opened applications happens at exactly the same speed. Scrolling, web browsing, and all basic interactions will be virtually the exact same. The biggest difference, performance-wise, would be in gaming, thanks to the beefier GPU and extra CPU cores. It's simply a more powerful chipset. That's visible in various benchmarks and will be visible in graphically intense games. For instance, the Icon was able to complete the Sunspider test in just over half the time of the 1020. For most, the difference won't matter. For some, this is just what the doctor ordered. As far as battery life goes, we haven't quite had the Icon long enough to provide detailed analysis, but we can compare them quantitatively. The Icon has a 2420 mAh battery to the 1020's 2000 mAh battery, but the Icon also has roughly double the pixels and more screen real estate. We've seen that the Snapdragon 800 is relatively power efficient, but there's no reason to believe just yet that the Icon's stamina will be significantly better than the 1020's. Testing camera quality was a bit interesting between these, mainly because we knew the 1020 had a significant advantage from the start. The 41 megapixel sensor has been the subject of much praise since last summer. It's still the smartphone camera to beat despite all the tough competition. The Icon's camera does a decent job of taking some of the best parts of the 1020's camera and packing them down into a reasonable size. It's still very respectable and more capable than practically all other smartphone cameras out there. The 1020 is capable of taking much higher res RAW shots, up to 38 megapixels. The thing is, those differences are never going to matter if you're only ever going to use the 5 megapixel images which are shared from the phone by default, but the advantages are barely noticeable if at all. White balance continues to be an issue with both models, however. The 1020 airs heavily on the warm side and the Icon more so on the cool side, making the 1020's pictures seem more lively, while the Icons are more true to life but still a little dull. Just know that both of these phones have powerful image sensors. To some, the 1020's larger sensor will pay off, but we imagine few will complain about the Icon's image sensing prowess. So which Lumia is the better smartphone overall? From a design standpoint, we fancy the slimmer, more bold chassis of the Icon, but the 1020's design is adored, despite the Oreo bolted on the back. The internals, across the board, are better on the Icon, but the payoff is minuscule if you're not a gamer. The only major improvement over the 1020 found on the Icon is the display, and it's substantial. The display is more balanced and sharper, it's also larger, without drastically increasing the phone's footprint. It's unfortunate the 1020 doesn't have Qi charging, and it's almost as upsetting that the Icon doesn't have glance. The 1020 manages to edge out the Icon in image sensing, but we feel the Icon is an all-around better phone. And this makes us very excited for the 1020's successor. Nokia just keeps getting better and better at what it does. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you're enjoying these videos, be sure to click the thumbs up button below and subscribe to the channel to see more videos in the future, as well as more Lumia Icon coverage over the next week. Be sure to follow us in all the usual places, Twitter, Facebook, and Google+, at Pocketnow. I'm Taylor Martin. You can find me on Twitter at CasperTech, and I will see you next time.